So then we get into actual brand equity and brand management. How do we determine how to brand, especially if we have more than one brand? So here, I guess I wanted to note on repositioning, the reasons we would reposition would be that our original positioning is no longer competitively sustainable or profitable, especially as we look around at all, again, competitively. So as we look around at all of our competitors, that space that we're occupying in the consumer's mind, maybe we're just the same as, you know, Kohl's or something, as JCPenney's, and we're trying to we want to distinguish ourselves from our competitors, not just be considered to be exactly the same. Or it could just simply be that better positioning opportunities arise based on trends, you know, that we think are going to be sustainable in the environment. But the big drawbacks here are that repositioning is incredibly time intensive and costly. You do have to give it time to work, and for customers to become accustomed to the new positioning, which also may have been an issue with JCPenney. With Old Spice, right? They invested in an expensive Super Bowl commercial to launch the entire repositioning campaign. They put a lot of time and effort into the campaign for it to be a success. All right, so when we get to brand management and brand equity, we have three main types of branding, in particular for when you have more than one product. Okay, so the first one is multi-product branding, where we use one name for all of our products in a product class. I'll give you an example in a minute. The second one is multi-branding, where we have multiple brands. Okay, each product or product line has its own brand name. Okay, so multi-product branding is where all the products have the same. Multi-branding is where all of the products have their own brand. And then private branding or store branding is where when we, as the name brand, supply a retailer with a product, right, that has the retailer's brand on it. So Great Value or at Walmart would be a good example here. So for multi-product branding, again, this is where all the products have the same brand name, or at least the line. Here we are trying to establish dominance in our offering category, okay, or maintain dominance in the offering category. This allows buyers to take any good brand equity that you have from one offering and then maybe come out with another offering, has the same brand name. And so that brand equity is, at least to some extent, transferable to the additional offerings that you come out with. So because of that, this lowers your promotion costs and it raises brand awareness. So now instead of having to have different ads and different packaging and all of those things, all of the 4 Ps for a whole bunch of different brandings, instead we have the one brand that we can focus on, lowering our promotion costs, lowering our packaging costs, perhaps even to some extent lowering our distribution costs, and raising brand awareness across the board. However, the drawback can be that if we have too many uses for one brand name, if we're trying to use our brand name across too many categories, it can dilute that brand equity or dilute the meaning of the brand for the consumers. Sometimes we use multi-product branding. We do this thing called sub-branding. So here we're combining our family brand with a new brand name. Okay, so we're building on favorable associations that customers have towards the family brand, but differentiating the new offering. I'll show you an example of that. Okay, and this one, using sub-branding, helps us differentiate offerings along oftentimes a price quality continuum by adding high-end, mid-level, and low-end offerings. Okay. So just regular multi-product branding, we have Nickelodeon and all their brands for their channels. All of them are Nickelodeon or Nick branded. Okay. Virgin is definitely a brand that utilizes multi-product branding across a vast number of categories. This is actually one where I think we get into that disadvantage of really diluting the brand meaning. The brand name Virgin doesn't tell you anything about the actual brand because they are in so many different product categories. And then Marriott, here we see a little bit of that sub-branding where all of the different brands for Marriott are branded with Marriott, but then you have Marriott Residence Inn and all of the Residence Inns, all of the Courtyard Marriotts, all of the Fairfield Marriotts. So you get still the brand equity, okay, but each of these sub-brands has a little bit of their own brand personality in it, and they can distinguish themselves from each other. Multi-branding, again, here each brand is uniquely positioned and branded within the market. Okay. So here we're focusing, a lot of times we use this if we're focusing on different market segments, or we're trying to position two different products uniquely from each other in the marketplace. Okay. A lot of times we see multi-branding occur when we acquire another company. So if we go out and we acquire a new company, it doesn't really make sense, most of the time at least, to rebrand all of their products that we just pulled under our umbrella, because they already have brand equity out there in the market. They already have a positioning, they already have goodwill, they already have brand awareness. And so, starting from scratch can really cause a lot of problems and just be, expensive and costly and time intensive again, kind of like repositioning, to change all of that with an acquisition. Okay, you see this right now with BB&T Bank and SunTrust merge, and instead of keeping one of their names, they decided to come up with an entirely new name for the bank that is, I believe, Truist. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. Whether they're able to keep current customers. Certainly there's not any transference of brand equity from the existing or the old brands to the new one, because Truist has nothing to do with BB&T or SunTrust. So I think that would be interesting to see. And then finally, another kind of downside that I alluded to already is that multi-branding definitely increases our promotional costs, because we have to advertise every single brand, as opposed to, we could advertise the family of Marriott hotels. Your big companies like Procter & Gamble and Unilever all use this particular branding strategy, where each product line has its own brand name. It's not Unilever Dove, it's just Dove, it's just X, okay? And then finally, let me go back one more time. I wanted to also note that one of the advantages, I talked about disadvantages, that it's costly, it is complex, so that's also an issue. But an advantage is that we reduce any risk that if there's a failure in one brand, that it will transfer to the firm itself or to other brands. And so, that sometimes the transferring of brand equity can be a positive, but it could also potentially be a negative if there's some sort of failure or catastrophe that happens, right? All right, so then private branding or private labeling, this is where a manufacturer supplies a reseller with an offering that has the reseller's brand name. If a reseller carries its own private brands, this helps avoid price competition with other resellers because they don't carry, there's no other seller carries, no other seller carries great value branded food. Okay? This can accrue brand goodwill that's attributed to the reseller as opposed to the brand name manufacturer, even though most of the time those products are manufactured by the brand name. But one of the challenges is that you have to locate that manufacturer who is willing to produce the product but put the private label on it. And that wraps up our chapter 5. So just to sum up, we really looked at the offering, our strategic decisions related to the offering itself. What is the offering? How do we position it? And then what type of branding strategy might we want to use? Thanks, everyone.